everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We're really excited to be presenting today on the 940 and 941 returns, talking through some expert strategies for compliance, savings, and success. My name is Hannah Walk. I'm the product manager here at Greenshades for tax and compliance. I've been working in compliance for more than 8 years, spanning products including property tax, affordable housing, data privacy, corporate ethics, and payroll tax. I joined the Greenshades team earlier this year, and I'm really excited today to be presenting with Chris.
Yep. Hey, everybody. Chris Haddon here. Thanks all for your time today. Excited to be here to talk about year end. So yeah, just a little bit of information on me. You maybe even heard me on a webinar before. Along with Hannah, I do quite a few webinars. So been in Greenshades since 2009. Got started in payroll and finance prior to that. The years just keep flying by, but definitely interested in all things related to payroll and compliance, and also one of the multiple certified payroll professionals that we have on staff here at Greenshades. As I mentioned, started in 2009, had a lot of different roles over the years, worked on the product team, compliance team, and yeah, really interested in really everything to do with compliance and payroll and taxes. And again, looking forward to today's discussion and another year end. It's quickly approaching.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit into our agenda for today. Our major focus is going to be talking about those year-end payroll returns, going through some of the common errors and pitfalls, as well as compliance considerations. We'll talk a little bit more about how tax software like Greenshades can help you, and then we'll wrap up and open up the floor to questions. So before we get too far in, we do need to remind everyone that this content is not legal advice. Neither Chris nor I are lawyers. And so we always want you to consult with your local counsel as well as your organization's legal and accounting teams before making any large decisions. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide a high-level overview of the year-end forms and payroll returns process with Greenshades. And also, if you do need access to counsel and you don't already have it, Greenshades does partner with My HR Counsel in order to provide our clients with affordable online on-demand legal advice. So let's get in and start talking about those year-end payroll returns. So the Form 941 is the quarterly return. That's what we use to report income taxes, Social Security, Medicare, as well as the tax that has been withheld from the employee's paychecks. And it also is where you calculate and pay the employer's portion of the Social Security and Medicare tax.
Next up, just FUTA and SUTA, as you may know it as, but our Federal Unemployment Tax Act and State Unemployment Tax. So the Federal Form 940 is going to be the annual form, and ultimately, along with the State Unemployment Tax, this really helps actually fund the unemployment compensation. This really kind of funds the administrative program overall. So really, the main things to take away from this is that reminder, only employers are paying the FUTA tax. In most cases, most employers are going to be paying both the federal and the state unemployment taxes. And again, only employers are paying the FUTA tax. So contrary to some states with state unemployment tax, the employees do not have any federal unemployment taxes deducted from their wages. And the Form 8027, so this is another annual return. For the most part, this is primarily only really applicable to large food or beverage employers. So actually my background prior to coming to Greenshades was in hospitality, a number of different franchise restaurant operations related to payroll. So certainly I'm familiar with this and with tipped workers. So this is going to be the annual form that you're going to use to report your yearly receipts and tips, along with, of course, what's hitting on the W-2. But the Form 8027 is going to be due at the end of the year, and we'll be talking about these due dates associated with this form here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, so Chris already mentioned a little bit about the Form W-2. As a employer, if you are paying more than $600 annually to a person who is employed by your company, you are obligated to file a W-2 for those employees of your company. The filing deadline is January 31st with both the Social Security Administration and the IRS. You can get a 30-day extension by submitting Form 8809, but it's really in everyone's interest to get those forms filed early so that you can be sure that you're meeting your obligations as an employer, and also making sure that your employees are able to file their 1040s effectively.
Just some notes here around, again, going into year and some helpful and critical reports that are going to be due for everybody. So just a reminder, so the quarterly state unemployment summary report, noted on this briefly earlier related to the federal unemployment taxes, but this is going to be where you're providing kind of a detailed breakdown of the payroll liabilities from that specific period of time that gets reported to the states. We've got our Form W-2 annual summary report that's going to go along with the W-2. So we've got the recipient copies that are going to the recipients of the employees, and then we're going to have W-2s that are going to be getting submitted to the states and to the federal government, the Social Security Administration specifically. And then, of course, the Form 941, which we'll go through these deadlines as well here in just a few minutes, which is, again, as noted earlier, this is going to break down those quarterly federal taxes that are getting reported 4 times a year.
Yeah, and we'll start by talking about a couple common errors and pitfalls, things that can really challenge your experience working with the IRS and getting these filings done. So the IRS publishes a list on a regular basis of things that are common rejection reasons. And the list is pretty consistent year over year. There's a couple themes that come up a lot. The number one reason why filings have been rejected so far this year, accounting for about 1.5% of all e-files of these kinds of returns, have been that the EIN or the name control sequence, which is a specific identifier assigned by the IRS, doesn't match what is in the e-file database. So always important to work with your software provider or your own accounting team to ensure that you have matching sets of EINs and name control sequences. Again, also some of the things, the next most common, this is related to the 941 specifically, is a duplicate taxpayer identification number has to an already accepted return for the same quarter ending period. So if you file a 941, but it has the same taxpayer identification number as a return that was already submitted for that quarter and it's not marked as a correction, it will be rejected as a duplicate. That same item applies to number 5 with the 940, where a duplicate taxpayer identification number to an already accepted return for the same taxing period will get rejected because it's not being perceived as a correction. So if you are filing corrections, make sure that you are clearly marking on your filing that it is a correction. The other 2 reasons why we see a lot of rejections and the IRS says they reject files is from a software ID from a provider who is not approved for the form, family, and tax year. It's really important to work with your provider to ensure that they are staying up to date with IRS requirements. This is something that Greenshades takes very seriously, and we work hand in hand with the IRS and other agencies to ensure that our standing as a provider is always up to date. And we do things like participating in acceptance testing, as well as beta programs for some of the new filing portals that are coming out in the next few years. And then the final rejection reason in our top 5 right now is that the online filer PIN does not match the EIN to which it's assigned in the e-file database. This is just like error number 1, where there's a PIN that's assigned to a filer and the PIN needs to match the EIN. So really important on the record keeping side, if you are doing those filings on your own, to ensure that your EIN, your name control sequence, as well as your online filing PIN, and any other kind of identifier that's been assigned to you by the IRS or that you've selected for security in the filing process, that you're maintaining good records of all of those things. There's a couple other mistakes that happen in the 941, and I'll let Chris talk about those.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so we've got them listed out here. So the again, thinking about the 941 specifically, so the number 1 mistake here is assuming line 1 represents all employees paid during the quarter. So specifically, what we're going to be looking at, or what we should be looking at, is the specifically the 12th day of the third month of the quarter. So we're not looking at a cumulative account for the entire quarter. So it's important to have that accurate. Number two, mistake is going to be claiming credits without verifying eligibility. So, in general, it's very important to obviously be thinking forward on this as early as possible. There's a lot of different opportunities on the 941 to account for those credits and to claim those credits, and certainly the last few years have been even more complex with additional credits that have been available. So always really important to make sure that you're following the appropriate steps and sequence before reporting that on the 941. And then the number three common mistake here is misusing line 7 for adjustments other than rounding. So specifically, adjustments for fractions of cents, right? And so not to jump ahead, but when you're using a software to prepare this, it's significantly easier to, of course, avoid this type of thing. But it's really important that does not just become a catch-all bucket to make everything balance out. That's not the intention for line 7 on the federal 941 form.
Now, if you do have an error in your filing and you need to file a correction, this can be a pretty intimidating process because it is not a small amount of work. So the Form 941X is used to correct errors on previously filed 941 forms. In order to do that, you need to identify those errors on your previously filed Form 941, then use Form 941X to rectify each error. You do need to make sure that for every 941 that you are correcting, it has its own 941X. So for example, if you're correcting for 3 quarters, you would need 3 941X forms, one for each quarter that's being corrected. The 941X has its own submission process. And then the only kind of exception there is that if you did have employees who were mistakenly treated as non-employees, you might file a 941X at the same time as the 941 in order to reconcile those numbers. The 941X is a line-by-line form, so it has all of the same fields in addition to some more as the 941, and you want to make those corrections line by line as well, only correcting the boxes that need to be adjusted in your 941. And now we'll talk a little bit about some compliance considerations.
All right, so first up here, considerations, certainly deadlines, right? This is something we always talk about at Greenshades going into year end, and we talk about it a lot, but there's so much happening during this year end period that we're headed into, where you've got annual taxes and quarterly taxes, and everything just sort of seems to come together at the same time, not to mention just everything else that happens during the year ends and budget planning and everything else. So it's really important that we think about these deadlines and mark them on the calendar, set reminders, whatever it is that you need to do to not forget about these things if they're not just already ingrained in your head. So Federal Form 940, this is going to be one of the many forms that's due at the end of January. So it's due by January 31st. The W-2 forms, of course, are due by the end of January as well. So of course, I think in the last maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, of course, these deadlines were accelerated. So not only do the recipient copies to those employees need to be issued and postmarked by the end of the month, but also those forms need to be filed to the government by the end of January as well. And then the other one here, they get a little bit more time on, the Form 8027 that we touched on earlier. This is not due until the end of February if you're filing on paper. If you do file this electronically, like used to be the case with the W-2s, you get a little bit more time. So you do get until the end of March to file those. So certainly not something that you want to fall behind on. There's obviously a lot of penalties associated with this. So definitely, these and other deadlines are very important to keep in mind.
And then there are those critical deadlines also for the 941. 941 is filed on a quarterly basis, so you need to ensure that you're filing a Form 941 every quarter. And the filing periods are aligned with the calendar, so January through March, April through June, July through September, October through December. And then the filing deadline for your Form 941 is the last day of the month following the end of the quarter. So your first quarter, 941, is going to be due April 30th. The second quarter would be July 31st. Third quarter would be October 31st. And then fourth quarter is January 31st. So you do get that month at the end of the quarter, after the quarter has ended, in order to reconcile your books and prepare the form. But always important to be aware, especially because the deadline for fourth quarter filing of the 941 does coincide with other filing deadlines, including that of W-2s.
So something to call out that may be impacting some of you, changes coming for this year and then really into 2024. So the Puerto Rican version of the 941 specifically, that's going to be going away. So the 941 and 940 Puerto Rico are going to be discontinued following this year. So after Q4 reporting period and at the end of 2023. So moving forward, if this does impact you, employers in Puerto Rico should now just be using the Spanish version of the federal form 940 and 941 for reporting those wages.
And now we'll get to my favorite part, which is talking about the roll tax software. And so there's a lot of really great advantages to using tax software in order to handle your filing and compliance. So it really helps you to stay ahead of those compliance changes. So with the assistance of your payroll tax software, you can make sure that you are well in hand on those upcoming compliance changes. You can catch mistakes before they happen. Because a lot of our software has built-in validation to ensure that your totals and other pieces of information are accurate compared to the information that is in your accounting systems. And then also get reminders for those upcoming filing deadlines so that you don't have to rush and you can be ready well in advance.
So an additional benefit and something to keep in mind is just actually keeping track of all of these forms, specifically the forms that you submitted, and maintaining these records. So for the Form 940 and the Form 941, the IRS does mandate that you keep these records on file for at least 4 years. And I would say that in general, there's always that fine balancing act of ensuring that you're keeping the appropriate amount of information in case of an audit, but you're also being very mindful of how you're storing that. So, when you're using a tax filing software and processing payroll in the cloud, it helps you keep up with these historical records. So not only do you have them in event of an audit, but you also have that single centralized and safe location. So you don't have to worry about the security of those forms and ensuring that when you're holding on to that sensitive information, that it's being stored in a secure environment.
Finally, there's a lot of other advantages to utilizing tax and payroll software, which includes access to our wide library of reports that are really helpful for doing your electronic filing, really simple process for building your tax returns and other forms, easily distributing those forms to your employees when needed, as well as filing with the appropriate agency. And then keeping track of the filing status for your submitted return, making sure that you have visibility into what you have submitted and what you haven't submitted, as well as the status of that submission. And then finally, always having access to exceptional level of customer service from our tax experts, as well as our product experts who are available to help you.
Yeah, so just to, as Hannah mentioned, as you're getting your questions loaded in, if you haven't already, just to kind of round things out here. So I noted I've been at Greenshades for a lot of years now at this point, but certainly not just me. We've got a lot of people here for a long time. We've got over 20 years of experience at this point in taxing compliance. This is how we got started as an organization. As we've grown over the years, we've kind of expanded into HR and kind of full payroll offerings. But at our core, where we started was in tax compliance, and it's something that's always very near and dear to our heart. So as we've grown over the years, we manage a lot of different forms for thousands of companies. We process millions of year-end tax forms every year-end, and as our solutions have evolved over the years based on client feedback, we have been proud to really continue to expand our offerings. So again, beyond just tax compliance at this point, but having a full kind of all-in-one solution from hire to retire for your workforce. So we have a lot of different groups internally to support different components of our products with Hannah and her team members. So payroll, HR, tax, really designed to be kind of that all-in-one solution. And the other thing that's going to continue to drive us through these years is these relationships that we've built up with our clients, and that's always made the support a very top priority to us. And so I think that for any of you that are already using Greenshades today, or any of you talk with someone that's using Greenshades today, people always have, just overwhelming positive feedback about our support team. We take that very seriously. So whether it's phone call, email, chat, online, a lot of different ways to get in touch with our support team, including extended hours during filing periods, because we want to make sure that we're here for you when you need help.
And just to wrap things up with some of those key items that we talked about today. So today we talked about specifically payroll tax returns, the 940 and 941, talking about which forms you need to file, as well as those filing deadlines. We talked about how to avoid compliance errors, making sure that your forms are timely and accurate, as well as that they have all the right information to help you and to help your employees when it comes for tax return time. And then also how to utilize technology to automate the process by reducing the risk of errors and saving time for your team with expert year-end technology.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here at today's webinar. We really appreciate it. And that's about all the time we have. We're going to give you guys back the rest of your day. We thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Chris and Hannah. You guys have a great day.